I never thought the sharpest humiliation of my life would come with string lights, white roses, and champagne flutes. But there I was, at my younger sister's wedding, smiling through clenched teeth, wearing a rental dress I ironed in a motel bathroom, and pretending that maybe, just maybe, I belonged. My name is Rowyn Ashford. I'm 34, a single mother, a waitress, a woman who's learned to be quiet when it hurts. I raised my son Jude on tips and grit. We live in a small apartment above a florist shop where you can hear every passing truck shake the floorboards. It's not glamorous, but it's ours. That night, Jude sat beside me in his too-tight blazer, eyes wide with wonder at the chandeliers. He thought we were walking into something magical. I let him believe that, but then my sister, Delilah, took the microphone. She smiled that wide, gleaming smile of hers, the kind that fools a room full of strangers, and said she wanted to thank her big sister for being a shining example. I exhaled, just a little, thinking maybe she'd grown. And then she said it. She's done it all on her own. No husband, no help, clearly no takers. But hey, she's here. The laughter was loud, the kind that echoes. Jude looked up at me, confused. I felt his little hand slide into mine. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't about family. It never had been. People like to romanticize the idea of family. The Sunday dinners, the old photo albums, the inside jokes that live forever in group texts. But for me, family has always been a quiet kind of exile. I didn't grow up poor. I grew up invisible. Catherine Ashford, my mother, had a talent for playing favorites. And in her eyes, there was only one star worth watching. My younger sister, Delilah. Delilah was the kind of girl who glided through life with a spotlight trailing her. She was blonde, bold, and blessed from birth. Valedictorian, homecoming queen, college scholarship, and now a picture-perfect wedding. Me? I was the girl who got pregnant at 25 by a man who disappeared faster than the second pink line on the test. When Jude was born, he became my whole world. I learned to cook with one hand and bounce him on my hip with the other. I skipped meals so he wouldn't. I worked 2 jobs, slept in shifts, and loved him so fully it made the loneliness bearable. But the rest of my family? They looked at me like a cautionary tale. A failure. A woman who had made her bed and was now doomed to sleep in it, alone. So when Delilah's wedding invitation came in the mail, I almost threw it out. My name was spelled wrong, again. The RSVP card didn't include a +1. I wasn't asked to be in the bridal party, and instead of an actual note from my sister, it came with a mass-printed message thanking guests for supporting our perfect day. I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked over at Jude, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing rocket ships on the back of a takeout menu. He'd never been to a wedding before, never seen his mother in a dress, never gotten to feel like part of the family he technically belonged to. So I said yes. I rented a dress off a clearance rack and borrowed heels from a coworker. I did my own hair in the mirror over our leaky sink while Jude practiced smiling in his clip-on tie. I told myself it was for him. Maybe, just maybe, showing up would shift something. Maybe they'd see us again. The venue was gorgeous. White roses lined the aisle, gold-accented cutlery sparkled under chandeliers, and a quartet played soft strings in the background. The kind of place that smelled like old money and expensive decisions. When we arrived, Delilah walked past me in a gown that looked straight out of a bridal magazine. She glanced down at Jude, then at me. "You made it," she said, like it was a surprise. "He's getting big," she added flatly, before turning back to the spotlight. No hug, no warmth, just a confirmation that I was still second tier. My mother didn't even acknowledge us. She brushed past like we were part of the decor. Jude didn't notice. He was too busy marveling at the lights. He leaned over and whispered, "It looks like a spaceship, Mama." I smiled and squeezed his hand. We were seated at the table 14, near the kitchen doors, where you could smell the dishwater every time they swung open. I laughed quietly. Of course. Still, I told myself to stay calm. It was just one night. Jude was happy. That had to count for something. And then came the speeches. The room was humming with energy. The soft clinking of glasses, flashes from phones, bursts of laughter that didn't include me. Delilah's world was seamless, polished, and curated. And there I was, the wrinkle in the fabric, sitting near the waitstaff doors and praying no one spilled wine on my rented dress. Jude sat beside me, swinging his legs, completely enchanted. "Mama, did you see that cake?" "It's taller than me," he whispered, eyes wide. His innocence was my only armor. I kept smiling for him. The place cards were letterpressed and embossed with gold. I found mine wedged between someone's purse and a discarded cocktail napkin. They spelled it Rowyn. I didn't bother correcting it. Dinner arrived in waves, plated elegance I couldn't pronounce. Jude tried to eat politely, but at one point got chocolate mousse on his tie. I dabbed at the stain with a linen napkin and whispered, "You're doing great, baby." He beamed. From across the room, I caught my mother's eye. For a brief second, I thought she might nod, smile, acknowledge my existence. Instead, she turned to the woman beside her and laughed at something. It could have been about anything, but I knew it was me. I always knew. I shifted in my seat, trying to stay invisible, knowing the cameras weren't for us. Delilah flitted from table to table like a politician, always smiling, always the center of attention. And when she finally reached ours, her eyes flicked over me like I was a placeholder. "You two look nice," she said, not even bothering to crouch to Jude's level. "Thanks for inviting us," I offered. She gave a tight smile. "Of course," she said, her tone making it clear she didn't mean it. Then came the toasts. A man in a navy suit, her fiancé's best friend, stood and told a safe, forgettable story about how Delilah used to sneak extra fries in college. People laughed. It was charming in that harmless, beige way. Then Delilah stood. She looked stunning, of course. Her dress shimmered under the reception lights. Her posture was flawless, her smile effortless. She held her champagne flute like a queen holding court. The room fell silent. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began. "It's the happiest day of my life, and I'm surrounded by people who mean everything to me." I held my breath. Jude leaned against my arm, still riding the fairy tale. Delilah talked about love, about fate, about Nate being her best friend. It was sweet, even I had to admit that, and for a moment, I let myself hope that maybe she wouldn't twist the knife. But then she turned. "And of course," she said, her voice lilting with mock sincerity, "I want to acknowledge my big sister, Rowyn. She's always been such a strong example." The spotlight shifted. Eyes turned. I straightened my spine. I smiled politely. "She's the bravest woman I know," Delilah continued. "She raised a child on her own. No husband, no help, just her and whatever babysitter was kind enough to step in." A few people chuckled. My stomach dropped. "But seriously," she added, her tone dripping sweet poison, "it's amazing how she's managed. A single mom, unwanted, but she still shows up." Laughter, louder this time. Not confused, not hesitant, just loud. I went cold. Jude blinked up at me, his small hand tightening around mine. "Why did she say that, Mama?" he whispered. Before I could respond, my mother's voice rang out from across the room. "She's a used product," Catherine said, her voice soaked in pride. "But hey, she still polishes up nice." The laughter turned sharp, cruel, real. I sat there frozen. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the music. I felt everyone watching, everyone laughing. Not with me, never with me, at me. I looked around, faces I'd grown up with, shared holidays with. Not one looked sorry. Not one looked surprised. Even Grandpa Henry, who once called me his little shadow, was staring down at his untouched dessert. And Jude, he looked shattered. Not because he understood all the words, but because he saw my face, and he saw theirs. That's when something in me cracked. I don't remember standing. One moment I was gripping my napkin like it was a lifeline, and the next I was upright, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't have a plan. No speech. No dramatic exit. I just knew I couldn't sit there another second while people toasted my shame. I felt Jude's small fingers tighten around mine. "Are we leaving?" he asked, his voice small, unsure. I nodded. "Yeah, baby, we're going." But before we could take a step, another chair scraped loudly against the floor. All eyes turned to the head table. Nathaniel Clark, the groom, Delilah's perfect polished fiancé, was rising slowly to his feet. He didn't look at Delilah. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at me. His face wasn't angry. It wasn't smug. It was something colder, stern, resolute. He reached for the microphone in Delilah's hand. She hesitated, just for a beat. Then, sensing the shift in the room, she let go. The mic whined softly as Nate adjusted it. The entire room went still. You could have heard a fork drop. He exhaled once, then said calmly, "Rowyn, please don't go." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. I froze, Jude half shielded behind me. "I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened," Nate continued, his voice steady, almost too calm. "I won't stand up here and let cruelty pass as comedy. Not tonight. Not ever." Delilah's face hardened. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Nate stepped out from behind the table, slowly approaching where we stood at the back of the room. He didn't rush. He walked like a man moving through fog, deliberate, certain, and unafraid. "I've heard a lot about family while planning this wedding," he said. "Tradition, loyalty, appearances." He stopped just beside our table, not quite facing me, not quite facing the guests. But what I saw just now wasn't family. It was mockery in a dress and a mother laughing at her own daughter's pain. The air left the room. Catherine sat frozen, her wineglass halfway to her lips. Nate turned toward Delilah. "You mocked your sister in front of everyone. You reduced her life to a punchline. And worse, you made her son watch." Delilah's jaw twitched. "It was a joke," she said softly. "It was cruelty," he answered. And then he turned to Jude, kneeled, looked him in the eye. "Your mom," he said gently, "is the strongest person in this room. Don't ever forget that." Jude didn't say a word. He just stared, wide-eyed, breathing quietly. When Nate stood again, he faced the crowd one last time. "I don't want to marry into a family that thinks shame is tradition, and laughter is more important than dignity, so I won't." And then he walked, past Delilah, past her parents, past the stunned guests still gripping their champagne flutes. He never looked back, and just like that, the fairy tale collapsed. People turned, shifting uncomfortably, some whispering. Others watched us like a scene from a train crash they couldn't look away from. Catherine stood up sharply, her chair screeching. "What an ungrateful boy," she barked. "Typical Ashford women, always making a scene." But no one laughed this time. No one clinked a glass. No one cheered. Her voice fell flat in a room that had already decided she'd lost. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For once, I wasn't the one who looked small. I turned to Jude and brushed his hair from his forehead. "Let's go home," I whispered. He nodded, and we walked. Slowly. Past their shocked faces. Past their silence. Halfway to the exit, I heard my name. "Rowyn!" It was Grandpa Henry. His voice shook. His eyes were rimmed red. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said something. Years ago." I nodded. I understood. His silence had hurt, but I knew how loud fear could be, and I wasn't carrying his guilt anymore. We stepped into the night air. It was cool, crisp, clean. Jude squeezed my hand. "Is the wedding over?" I smiled. "Yeah, baby. I think it ended exactly how it was supposed to." The silence that followed us out of that reception hall was deafening. No music played. No one followed. Even the air outside felt freer, like stepping out of a pressure chamber. Jude was quiet as we walked to the car. His small hand still wrapped in mine, like he wasn't sure the world had stopped spinning yet. I helped him into the back seat, buckled him in, and sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting the engine. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just felt still. The drive home was quiet. No radio. Just the soft hum of tires on asphalt, and Jude tapping his fingers against the window in a rhythm only he understood. That night, after I tucked him in and kissed his forehead, I stood at his doorway for longer than usual. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way that made the contrast from earlier even starker. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls. Unknown numbers, distant cousins, even some guests I hadn't spoken to in years. I ignored them all. By noon, a friend texted me a link to a Facebook video. Someone had recorded Nate's speech. It had already hit 50,000 views. The comments were pouring in. She deserved better. He's a real man. Every single mom out there just got a little bit of justice. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear suits at weddings. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just let myself feel it. The weight that had been crushing me for years, suddenly gone. Later that week, a small bouquet of wildflowers arrived at my door. No return address, no note, just a tiny card that read, "To the Lioness." I didn't need to ask who sent it. The wedding was off, quietly scrubbed from Delilah's social media like it had never existed. No public explanation, no dramatic posts, just erased. She never reached out. Catherine did, once. Not to apologize, of course. Just to say that I had embarrassed the family by not playing along, that my lack of humor had ruined everything. I let her talk for 30 seconds. Then I said something I never thought I'd have the courage to say. "I'm not your scapegoat anymore." And I hung up. No tears, no shouting, just a clean break. Final. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to admit they were wrong. I just needed to stop waiting for permission to see my own worth. Jude changed too. He asked more questions now. About kindness, about cruelty, about what makes someone brave. Sometimes he'd give pretend speeches to his action figures, defending the little guy. I watched him, quietly amazed. One night, as we brushed our teeth side by side, he looked up at me in the mirror and asked, "Mom, are you still sad about what Aunt Delilah said?" I paused, then answered honestly, "Not anymore. Why?" He shrugged, a little toothpaste on his chin. "Because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight." That stayed with me. Because he was right. I didn't yell. I didn't insult anyone back. I didn't storm out crying or demand justice. I just stood up, held my son's hand, and walked away. And someone else, someone unexpected, finally spoke the words I never could. 6 months have passed since the wedding that wasn't. There was no official statement, no family meeting, no dramatic confrontation, just silence. A silence that, for once, wasn't mine to carry. Delilah moved on like nothing had happened. The bridal photos vanished from her Instagram. The countdown posts and ring selfies stopped. Catherine stayed quiet too, except for one email she sent me weeks later with the subject line, "When you're ready to talk like adults." I never opened it. I didn't need to. Because the truth is, I didn't walk out of that wedding for revenge or vindication. I walked out because I was done. Done shrinking, done apologizing for surviving, done being the family's living cautionary tale. My life didn't transform overnight. I still work the same shifts, still juggle rent and groceries and laundry. But I stand straighter. I speak louder when it matters. And I no longer hide in the back of rooms I've earned the right to be in. I see the change in Jude, too. He doesn't just look at me like I'm his mom. He looks at me like I'm the kind of person he wants to become. Someone who doesn't break, even when the world tells her she should. He still talks about Nate sometimes, calls him the man with the microphone. Sometimes he'll ask why Nate did what he did. I always give the same answer. Because love isn't about saying the right things when it's easy. It's about doing the hard thing when it counts. That night, I didn't get a bouquet. I didn't toss one either. I didn't dance under fairy lights or cry happy tears into a champagne glass. But I left with something better. I left with my son's hand in mine, my dignity intact, and the quiet certainty that I no longer owe anyone an explanation for the life I've built. And that was the ending no one saw coming, especially the ones who thought they'd written me out of the story.